Welcome to the Crafty Mini, and in this one I'm going to be showing you my paint process for this competition piece that I did. It's a local paint competition. I've not done a competition piece for a few years now, and I thought I'd give it a go. So we're going to be doing this skeleton 3D print. It's about sort of between, I'd say, 60 to 70mm scale. So I've got it on a plinth that I've done some milliput to make this sort of jutting out rock, because the stance on the skeleton was quite wide, and it just gives a bit more sort of visual interest to the base as well when it's finished. And then we've base coated it all in English uniform by Vallejo. So starting off with the accent colours, just going in there with some burnt red by Procryl. So I decided for this, because it's competition, I'm going to use my better paints and take my time, do a bit more blending than I would normal, for say like a 28mm scale for example. So just going to go through now at this point and just pick out all of those bit of red accents that I want. The idea behind the colour scheme was I want to do something sort of leaning towards that 300, the Frank Miller comic book and the Zack Snyder film. So reds with sort of like bronzy with like slight gold highlights, just because it's a really nice colour companion that go together, and I thought it looked nice with this miniature. So with all the sort of robe done, we're going to go in there and mix the burnt red Procryl with a bit of scarlet 1:1, and we're going to use this for the first sort of highlight and then build up from there. And you'll see now I'm just concentrating on the highest point areas, the ones that are catching the most light, just to give that nice transition. And I find that the burnt red's a really nice dark colour in the folds, but it doesn't take away too much from the colour, the saturation of the actual red. And as we build up the scarlet, and we'll be adding more into the mix and getting that red really vibrant and bright. And I'm just sort of sketching this out on the actual miniature. I'm not being too neat, basically figuring out especially on this flowing robe at the bottom, the areas where I want the most colour and highlights to be. On the robe that goes under his shoulder pads, because the folds that are there on the actual sculpt, it's a bit easier to follow. You just hit the highest point of the folds and then a little bit on underneath, just to give a bit of variation. But a pretty simple process at this point, and it's just a case of building up those highlights. So at this point for the next highlights, all it is, so originally it was 1:1 scarlet and burnt red. Now I've just added a bit more scarlet, so it's 2:1. And again, just building up the highlights on the upward facing areas. And because you're using just a little bit more of the scarlet, it actually blends in with the previous layers as well, and it just makes the transition look a lot more smoother and nicer. And again, just sketching out those areas and then filling it in, and we'll do like almost like an edge highlight with pure scarlet at the very end of this. Now at this point I've just got the pure scarlet, and I'm feathering on the highest raised areas on the folds on this fabric, and just picking out the edges. And it just, it blends, because that scarlet's been in there the whole way through. It blends up to this colour and it adds a really nice highlight. And then the top folds of this part here as well, this will get more of it up to the actual tips of the fabric. And then going around all the little sort of folds is really simple. You're just picking out those areas with the pure scarlet and just highlighting everything, and it just makes it pop. It gives it a lot more visual interest. And for this sort of scale as well, they're a nice sort of scale to practice these sort of techniques on as well. And it's why I always recommend people should try a bust or at least a 50mm, if not a 60-70mm scale miniature, because they're so big. There's less areas for you to hide, so you've got to concentrate a bit more and put that little bit extra detail in. And with something like this, a really simple, where effectively we've only got the bone, the red, and then the armour accent colours, it's a really simple way of building up and getting some visual interest on the model. And as you see here, just going through and picking out all those edges. So as I mentioned, I was sort of inspired by the Spartan 300 colour scheme. So to start off with the gold sort of bronzy armour, I'm actually going with Procryl's copper, just because I find it's a lot lighter than the bronze initially, and because we're going to be dulling this down slightly with some washes and some other little bits, I thought it'd be a nice touch. I want to go almost too bright initially, because we're dulling it down, and if I dull the bronze down itself, it'll actually become too dark. So starting off with a much brighter colour, and just going around there picking out all the armour. And this is one of those, just take your time with it when you're picking all the bits. If you do accidentally go over any areas, you can clean them up. For me, especially where I've already done the red, I'm trying not to go near that. I do catch it a couple of times, but I go back in with the original colours that are on my wet palette and just fix those up. But there's quite a lot of visual interest on this miniature, and it was a nice, I like the pose as well. And it's just, I don't know, it's just got a nice feel about it, and there's not too much detail, which is an issue I've been having with some miniatures recently, which I'll probably talk about in a future video, or maybe on a podcast with Welsh. I find that these more simpler sort of shapes and things, you can express yourself a bit more, be a bit more free and loose with it, and have a bit more fun. But yeah, as I say, just going through, blocking out the colours at this point. So because the weathering process for the armour is going to be the same as on the bone initially, so I'm going to start now and block out all the actual bones on here. So this is Golden Brown by Pro Krill with a little bit of ivory, just to brighten it up for this initial layer, and then we'll add more ivory for the highlights later on. And again, like with the armour, it's just taking our time, going through, blocking out all of the bones on the actual skeleton. There's quite a bit of sort of fiddly bits on, especially when you get up to the rib cage, and because I've already painted the armour and the cloak, it's just, again, just take your time with it if you have a model like this, and it just basically, it's going to cause you less hassle in the long run. Now, because this is going over a bit of a slightly darker base coat, although the Pro Krills do cover really, really well, it does go on a little bit streaky and patchy in places. So all I do is, rather than keep adding paint to that, is just let that bit dry, go to somewhere else on the model, and then come back and add a bit more if I need to. Because the worst thing you can do is, if the paint's still wet and you add more paint, you're either going to chuck too much paint up and block out the details on the mini, or even worse, you'll actually pull the paint off. And it was, to be fair, it was a lot of fun painting this mini and going back and doing a competition piece. As I say, I've not done one for a couple of years, and this turned out okay, to be honest. There's another competition coming up that I'm going to enter. I've got a really nice bus for that one, which we'll be doing in a future video in the next sort of 3-4 weeks, and it's one I can spend a bit more time with as well. As I say, with this one, I'd gone to my local gaming store, just pick up some stuff, some paints and whatnot, and they've seen a lot of my paint jobs in the past, and I've helped people there, sometimes giving tips, and the guy behind the desk was basically like, do you want to enter? And unfortunately, I literally only had 4 days to get this done, so it was a bit rushed, not as good as I could do it, but still I enjoyed the process, and the finished product does look pretty good at the end. Right, so then what I've done is, on my palette I've mixed some of the red with the bone colour, just to do the wood on the staff, the shaft of the spear, and then added a little bit more of the red in, just to darken it, to do like the wraps around the legs and things. So that's all the main colours just bulked out now. The red's done in terms of highlights and things, so we've just got to work on everything else. Now, before I do that, with the actual base, I've decided to use some of the colours on the wet palette, mix them up. And you can see I'm wet blending them on the actual base here. Looks a bit rough and ready, but when it's dry, it'll get a dry brush to bring it up, and then we'll add some other details on the base. And it's just I like to, with something like this, because this is more of like a desert sort of theme, it marries because I'm using the same colours that's on the miniature as well, it marries everything up together. And I've used where I've added more of the red to give that sort of rosy colour is you see there's between the legs on the miniature, where the majority of the shadow would be cast, and then I'm using the bone colour around the edges just to brighten everything up, and it just adds, again, a bit more contrast to the actual piece. But we'll weather all this down as well in the next step. So at this point, everything's blocked out, and I'm going to do a unifying wash. So with this is my own mix, where it's Agrax Earthshade and Seraphim Sepia mixed together with a little bit of dark tone, and this is just going all over. This stains really heavily, but it gives her a nice sort of depth, especially to any browns, and in this case any bone coloured things on any of your miniatures. And because this being a skeleton, this is the ideal wash. I'll go over the red as well, and the copper, just adds, again, a bit more depth to the colour. And you can see why, instead of painting bronze originally, we did copper, because this dulls it down quite a bit. it's still quite vibrant in comparison to the rest of the model. So everything just gets this nice unifying wash all over, pretty simple, and then let that fully dry before we go into the next step. If you're low on time, one thing you can do is just hit it with a hairdryer. That's what I tend to do. Just don't leave the hairdryer pointed directly at it. Keep moving the hairdryer around, because you can in some instances actually push the liquid out, and you'll just tea stain all of your miniature, and it doesn't look very good. But yeah, just give it a full liberal coat, and then we'll go from there. So at this point the wash is fully dry, and the miniature is extremely muted in terms of the colours that were originally on there. And this is one of my favourite parts now. So this is really simple. I go back in with the original colours and just pick out the highlighted areas. So on the ribs here, I'm only concentrating on the sort of middle of the rib where it curves round, leaving the edges that are close to the spine and the front of the sternum, leave them with as the washed sort of brown, and it just marries everything up. And also, when after the first wash, you look at it and it is very, very shiny, and just because of the medium, but we'll be dulling all that down with varnishes later. But it's just a case now going around all those little edges and the little bits, the high points that are the most light, just to give it a lot of contrast in the colours, and go around and just pick everything out. Now with this bit I've zoomed right in just because I wanted to show a bit how this highlighting step works. So you can see here on the actual skull now I'm working on, you've got the original colour that was dulled down with the wash, and I'm going in there and picking out the raised areas, and it blends in quite nicely. If you make sure that your coats are quite thin, because it's better to do a couple, 2 or 3 thinner coats and build up the opacity rather than just putting one thick coat, because all you're going to do is go back to your original colour and none of that shade will come through from the initial wash. And just going around and picking everything out and making sure it all blends together, and it makes the skull does pop at the end of this. Right, so once I've highlighted all the bone up again, with the bright ivory that I've mixed in with the golden brown, I add a bit more of that to give a higher point, and I'm just going around and picking up the most prominent details. So in particular on the skull, because that's the focal point, it'll be the jawline, the brows of the skull, and the little arch on the nose and things, and the teeth. And it's just picking out all those finer details. And then on some of the upward facing parts of the bone, like his arms, just the topmost points and just a couple of dots here and there. It just adds a bit more visual interest, and again it's building that contrast from the dark to the light, because effectively we are painting light on a miniature, and the more visual interest you can give it and the more contrast, the more detailed it looks. Right, so with your metallics, like a normal paint, you can actually mix them. It's something I'm fairly new to. I've never even thought about doing it before, but it's something I've started doing, and you get these really nice, especially for like edge highlighting and things. So you can see here on the shoulders and whatnot, and just going around and picking out the highest points and just making that metallic pop a little bit more. It just, again, it's building up the contrast, and especially with metals, they should be, because they react to the light differently to say cloth and bone in this instance, and it just builds up that visual interest. The light bronze is a really nice mix. So for example, if you were doing a dark silver armour, then you could add a bit of sort of chainmail or a lighter silver in there just to build up a highlight, and then the very, very like sort of tips of the highlights you could then do pure chainmail. And again, it's like with the red on the cloak, it's building up that gradient into the highest points there. As I say, something I'm pretty new to. Never thought of doing it before. I was watching some videos, and I'll give a shout out to Resourceful Minis on YouTube. It was one of his videos that I saw, and I was like, oh, actually that's a really good idea, and I've started doing it more in my miniature painting, and my metallics look a lot better, because I've struggled doing non-metallic metal. I just can't seem to get it right. So using this method, you get a nice variation and depth of colour in your metallics, but you're not doing anything different compared to your normal sort of flat acrylic colours. So at this point I've added a few highlighting steps using the same methods on the base, and then all I wanted was a bit more richness in the metallics. So I've got Army Painter's dark red tone, It's watered down sort of 2:1, and I'm just going into these sort of panelled areas on the armour, just to pick out those little details and just to give it a bit more sort of depth and richness. And the red as well is a really nice complementary colour to the bronze as well, and it also marries up with the red of the robe on the miniature as well. So it's trying to find something that mixes, with any coloured sort of washes or shades. Obviously they'll tint whatever they go on, so but on a metallic as well, it's really nice. So if you ever want to do that sort of blued, you see on modern military weapons, you can have this blued sort of effect on the steel, a thin down blue wash, and then put that over, and it gets into the recess, and it just gives a nice hue. It's a really nice effect for metallics, and it just makes them pop a little bit more compared to like a standard, just like a silver and then a black wash over, which does look good and adds a lot of contrast, but you can just a bit more variation in the actual colours by using a coloured wash. And here he is finished. So I did a bit of pigment powder on the base, which I had to go in and correct after this filming the shot, because I realised it was a bit too thick, so I've just gone back in and washed it out a little bit. Overall, pretty happy with it. As I say, I didn't spend as much time as I would like to have done, because I entered this competition quite late. I wasn't aware of it, but there's another one coming up where I've got a good 2-3 weeks to spend on this bust that I've ordered. So you'll be seeing that in an upcoming video. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this. I think it's a nice contrasting colours, the red with the copper, and then the bone. The highlighting on the bone in particular, especially the skull, I'm really happy with. It does make it pop a little bit more. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's come out nice. As of time of editing this, we've had the results back. I came fourth, which I'm quite happy with, because I haven't done a competition for a long time, and I've got to say the 3 entries above me were fantastic. They were really, really good. One thing I'll probably do on the next time I do a piece like this, is maybe spend a bit more time on the base as well, give that a bit more visual interest. But yeah, really, really happy with this. I've enjoyed the process, and it's nice doing a competition piece again. It's something, as I say, I've not done for a while. I packed in all that sort of stuff a few years ago, but thoroughly enjoyable. Thank you all very much for watching anyway and indulging, and hope you enjoy it, and see you on the next one. Cheers.